Hey, this is Adam Torres, and I'm here to tell you that it has never been easier to start your very own podcast. At Mission Matters, our goal is to amplify stories that matter. That means we want to help you start your podcast because your story matters. We can do this in 3 different ways. 1, join our podcast school and take a free or paid course. 2, visit our resources page where we've already figured out what you need, such as where to host your podcast. Or 3, heck, we can even do everything for you through our podcast agency, including editing for cheaper than you can do in-house. Oh, and no contract, service is month to month. Get started by heading over to missionmatters.com and click on Start a Podcast. All right, now let's get into the show.
Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Mission Matters Innovation Podcast, your source for all things innovation. My name is Adam Torres. You can follow me on Instagram at AskAdamTorres to keep up with my book releases, book tour schedule, signings, all that other good stuff. Always love to connect with you there. And as always, if you'd like to apply to become a co-author of one of my upcoming books, just head on over to the website, missionmatters.com, and click on Become an Author to apply. All right, so today I have Shawn Flynn on the line. He's head of an Incubator over at a Global Accelerator. He's an investment banker, and he's also host of the Silicon Valley podcast. Shawn, welcome to the show.
Adam, thank you. This is an honor. I'm a huge fan of your show. I'm glad to be on.
Oh, man, Shawn. So, hey, I'm glad to have you on because today's topic is right what I will want you on the show to talk about. So best practices for startups. I know you work with startups in a number of facets, whether it's as an investment banker, whether it's at the Global Accelerator you work with, or obviously on your podcast. I mean, a number of different ways that you're helping startups. So let's just start off with, to kick us off before we get into today's topic, tell us a little bit more about what you're doing as an investment banker, please.
Yeah, so Adam, as you know, my whole day is spent in the startup ecosystem here in Silicon Valley, whether I'm working with very early stage companies or later stage companies. So investment banking comes in later rounds, they're A round or later when they're looking to raise 10 million or more. Or we also work with individuals, family offices, venture capitalists, groups that have shares of companies that are pre-IPO that they're looking to sell on the secondary market. So for example, there's a couple of companies like SpaceX, Airbnb, Robinhood that maybe one investor has held on to for several years and is looking to liquidate, but there's not that market for it. So we can come in and we can find the buyer, find the seller, make that connection, pair it off so everyone is happy. And for that, we look for lot size of $1 million or more. But we do a lot of services for the later stage companies. But like I said, I work with pre-seed, idea, through the whole gamut at all different ranges of their life cycle, and it's amazing. And, some of these guys I also get on my podcast, the Silicon Valley podcast. So at any stage, I love working, I love hearing, I love meeting people that are way smarter than me and and tell me about the future of tomorrow today. So it's great. I really enjoy it.
That's awesome. And I think that's a great transition. So let's dive into today's topic. So best practices for startups. As I mentioned, you work with startups of various sizes, different in different stages of growth. Where do you want to start with this? This is a big topic.
So let's start, I guess, at the very, very beginning. And what I mean by that is when a startup just has an idea. And a lot of startups, they think, okay, I have an idea. Now I need to raise a lot of money and go out to the market. Where in reality, it should be more, okay, I have an idea. Let's test this idea. Let's see if the market really wants this idea. Now, when there's proof that there's a demand for it, now let's start investing more capital, more time in that, and kind of the micro steps that are needed in the process of growing a company. A lot of people just think it's A to G to Z, when it's really, A to A1 to A2 to A3, and there's so many steps just moving down the line that I don't think a lot of people know about, especially when it's their first time doing a startup. A lot of founders are straight from college, or they were in the corporate world where they were isolated in this one little hub that their world is, their little niche. And when you're doing a startup at the beginning, building a company, you're doing everything. And so, Adam, I'd love to talk about just the beginning of the company, also the value of what a lot of people already have that they might not know about. So let me know what your thoughts are.
So in terms of, okay, so let's say they have this idea, and they're now it's now time to get it started. Let's say they took care of all those basic things. So they went online, they maybe got some advisors, they got something, and now let's go a little bit further because we only have so much time on this one. There's a shorter podcast. Might have to have you on for another episode, but now they have what they believe is product market fit. So they have a little bit of customers, and now they're at that stage to where they're in the in between, and they're thinking about, like, should I take on money? Should I start thinking about raising money? What should I do next? We're making a little bit of money, but we want this thing to grow. Let's talk to them for a little bit. They may have a couple hundred clients. They may have made a couple $100,000 or, maybe $1 million in revenue over the course of X amount of years. And now they're like, oh, I'm kind of stagnant. I want to make this thing go. Like, what do I do? Should I take on capital? What kind of advice would you give to that person? And obviously that's a broad question, and I don't mean it to be a loaded question either. So everybody's going to be a little bit different. But generally speaking, like, what would you, that type of founder, what kind of conversation would you have with them?
I mean, honestly, I'd sit down and go, okay, let's really think about if you need money and really if it's the best decision for you. And the reason for that is if this company hasn't taken on any funding so far, the owner, I'm guessing, probably has either 100% of the equity, his shares, or if he's given a little bit to maybe the CTO, CFO, or some other people as he's built this company. And once they take on outside money, their shares are going to be diluted. Once they take on outside investors, they're going to have bosses. They're going to have people they have to report to. Their time is going to have to be allocated differently. It's not going to be 100% focused on the business itself and growing the business. It's going to have to be on raising capital. And a lot of people don't understand the time commitment that takes. There's founders I've met in the past that have said, God, if I just spent the several hundred hours that it took me to raise this money and use that to grow my sales channels, use that to work with my existing clients to grow those, I would have been better off because I would have owned 100% of the company still. I would have been at the exact same spot revenue-wise. And to be honest, they say, they would have been happier as well because of, there's just so much stress in that goes into raising capital that a lot of people don't know about. They just think it's all glory. They think they go out there, they do a pitch, someone in the audience likes it, they have a meeting, a check's written, done. When it's a lot more
in the movies it works
process.
like this, Shawn. In the movies it works like that. Come on.
Well, in the movies, I'm on a beach right now with my yacht parked over there in my private island, and
oh man, that's well said, Shawn. And I'm glad you said that. And the reason I'm glad you brought it up is because it just shows your experience that you've worked with a lot of companies. And so the last thing many of the people in the audience expected was for you from an investment banker for them to say, you should think twice about taking on capital because it's not always the right thing to do. Like, that's the last answer a lot of people would have expected from someone in your seat. So, which also makes me even more happier to bring up your podcast and what you're doing there. So let's dive into that. So the Silicon Valley podcast. First off, what was the inspiration for you creating this?
So after college, I lived overseas for about 8 years. I lived in Costa Rica. I lived in China, Europe, back in China. And I met some amazing entrepreneurs there. And then when I moved back to Silicon Valley, I stayed in touch with them. And they kept asking me similar questions. And in this process also, I started working at an incubator that has 15 locations, offices around the world. And I would meet entrepreneurs that would also have the exact same questions. I just kept getting all these questions of, how do we incorporate in the U.S. when we go there? How do we find the right lawyer? How do we raise capital, get our paycheck, all these things. And I had the same things repeated over and over again. And I'd make introductions, have this meeting, have that meeting. And then one day I decided, okay, I'm going to start recording these meetings. And I had a TV show in Mountain View called Silicon Valley Successes. It grew to 28 cities in the U.S., but the reach wasn't good enough for me. And I was thinking, okay, what could I do to have access globally and I was thinking, podcast is the way to do it. So I started a podcast September of last year. Since then, I've had names on my podcast such as Melanie Perkins, co-founder of Canva, Jim McKelvey, co-founder of Square, Patrick Lee, co-founder of Rotten Tomatoes, and a lot of other big names. And the reach has been amazing. I've gotten emails from people in Kenya, from Nigeria, saying, thank you for this information. This is exactly what my startup needed. I've had emails from contacts overseas that have just taken up some of the guests on their offers. Some of the guests have said, I'll give a 30-minute consultation for people that write a response for this interview. And it's just amazing to hear the feedback I'm getting from the entrepreneur ecosystem of support for the information that's in these podcasts.
Man, that's awesome. I love it, Shawn. It's great, and you're doing great work. So just to give people a flavor of the type of content and or questions that you ask in the podcast, give us a feel for the format, because I definitely want my audience to go over there and check it out.
So the first question I always ask the person is, tell me about their background, their history, and then we go right into their subject matter expertise. So, for example, yesterday I interviewed this gentleman, Mark, who is a product design expert here in Silicon Valley. He's engineered products for 30 years. The first thing, we just go into, tell me about the future of wearables, where you see that going, what's the hindering the progress. We went into there's a plane going by. We went into the whole manufacturing process life cycle, from idea to coming up with the MVP to finding the manufacturers over in China. So a lot of the podcasts, I do my best to try to get them as much information and actionable items, actionable steps that they can take to move their company forward and just find out about that sector and the future in that area of tech. So I almost want to say it's going to an accelerator every time you're listening to an episode.
Man, that's awesome, Shawn. So I love it, and I think the cool thing about it too is that you're really giving people access to these conversations that they may not have normally, because a lot of the people that you're interviewing, they may want to do well, they may want to, for example, the gentleman you mentioned that's in a product engineer, it's like he'd love to take your call, he'd love to help, but he's busy, he doesn't have time. So by listening to this episode, and you're going to get a lot of that information that he would have loved to give you one-on-one. So I love what you're doing. I think it's awesome. So Shawn, that being said, if somebody is listening to this and they want to connect with you and your overall brand, whether it's as an investment banker, whether it's at the Global Accelerator, or obviously to listen to your podcast, which I want everybody to go and do, so the Silicon Valley Podcast, what's the best way for them to connect with you and your brand?
So go to thesiliconvalleypodcast.com. All my social media handles are there. In fact, all of them are just Shawn Flynn, SHAWN, FLYNN SV for Silicon Valley. So once again, that's at Shawn Flynn SV. That's my Twitter handle, my Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn with that. I have that for all my, even YouTube. So look for that. Add me. Connect with me. I'm most active on LinkedIn. So if anyone wants to send me a personal message, please connect with me on LinkedIn, and I will respond immediately.
Man, that's awesome. Well, Shawn, really appreciate you coming on the show today and making my job easy. So thank you, because I love having podcasters on here because it just goes by fast. So thank you again. And to the audience, as always, thank you for tuning in. Hope you got a lot of value out of this. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, leave me a review on the Apple iTunes Store, and if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, Mission Matters Innovation, definitely give us a subscribe there, but also leave us some comments on the video. Love to know what kind of projects and products that you're working on. And Shawn, thanks again for coming on the show.
Adam, thank you. This is great. Thanks